Hello and welcome back to The Hole in the Wall. Today we'll be discussing the murder case of Lindsay Hawker, a case that is just so incredibly mind-bogglingly strange that I just had to cover on the channel, because it truly does show the lengths a person will go to just to hide what they did, and just the lengths a person will go not only to hide their shame, but to hide from any sort of consequence. So if you're interested in this case, please join me as we talk about the murder case of Lindsay Hawker. Now, viewer discretion is advised for this video, as we will not only just be touching on the murder aspect, but we will also be touching on the physical and sexual abuse that this case has. So with all that being said, let's get into the murder case. So Lindsay Hawker was born to Bill and Julia Hawker in Coventry, England, and she studied at the University of Leeds and graduated with a first-class honors degree in 2006 for biology. And she was actually planning on getting her master's degree, but then ended up teaching English in Tokyo, Japan in October of 2006. Lindsay was very excited to do this job, and even her boyfriend was planning on moving in at a later date. Now, she would always regularly take the train, as if you guys don't know, the trains in Japan are just one of the most popular ways of travel in that part of the country. So Lindsay would always go take a train to the school, back to her place, to the school, back to her place. Now one day she gets stopped by Tatsuya Isashi, which he tried to basically trick Lindsay that he was one of her students. So he stopped Lindsay one day when she was going home and basically tried to trick her into believing that he was one of her students. The lie was that he was learning English to study abroad, but Lindsay, being pretty smart, called out his bullshit and basically said, you know, I know my students, you're definitely not one of them. And with Itachi, basically said, okay, yeah, you got me. So instead of just leaving him, you know, just kind of going back to her house, she invites him back to her apartment, where she was living with two roommates at the time. She invites him in, gives him a glass of water, and they end up making an agreement that she will teach him English. And he ends up drawing a picture of her, ends up signing it, and ends up putting his phone number on it. Now, let's get into Tatsuya Isashi, as he grew up with a very comfortable life. His mother was a dentist, and his father was working in the medical field. But he was described as a loner with an obsession with physical fitness, and this will be very important later on. But he was very physically fit, but wasn't very physically fit in the mind, as a lot of people ended up saying that he just wasn't always there. Now, 4 days before the death of Lindsay, she would end up writing to her boyfriend about how she met Isashi. On March 24th, 2007, both Itachi and Lindsay would meet up in a cafe to study for English. Right after, they ended up leaving the cafe and they ended up going to Itachi's apartment, basically just to drop off Itachi. Now, Itachi tricked Lindsay and said that he had no money to pay her with, that any sort of money was in his apartment. So they end up both going up to the apartment, and Lindsay even told the driver that to wait for her for a couple minutes because she'll be back down. So they go up to the apartment and never seen for the next few days. So 2 days later, the school that Lindsay is working at calls her father and her roommates and anyone they can to understand where Lindsay's at, as she should be teaching these students, but she's not here. Never called out, never did anything. She just up and disappeared. So they call the police and they say, hey, Lindsay hasn't been seen. We need some more information, missing persons case. So they look at the CCTV footage about where she was. So they pull up the CCTV footage and they see both of them at the cafe, leaving to the taxi, and they both end up in the apartment. So 2 officers go down and they go to Itachi's apartment. They end up instantly knowing that Itachi's in there, which kind of rings some bells in their head. So they call up a couple more officers, since at this point Itachi was relatively known by the police for some very minor misdemeanors. So they now bring in another 7 officers leading up to the 9. And they basically tell Itachi to open the door. We want to come in and we need to see if Lindsay's in there. Itachi, knowing that he was cornered, makes one of the most weirdest decisions. So he ends up, and this is where the physical fitness part really plays in, he ends up outrunning every single officer. Now, at the time, the 9 officers were split up between the inside of Itachi's apartment building and the outside of the apartment. Itachi ends up outrunning and escaping the officers in the building, and then ends up escaping the officers down outside the apartment. Well, there's nothing really the cops can do but find out what Itachi was hiding. And the sight that they come upon is completely and utterly disappointing, as they see a bathtub on the balcony. They see a shopping cart in the apartment building, and they move closer, they move closer, and they move closer, and they notice inside the bathtub there is soil, sand, and a body. The body of Lindsay Hawker, completely bruised, cuts all on her body. Her hair is shaven and she's zip-tied and gagged. I mean, it's just completely a nightmare. And now the father has entered Tokyo, Japan, hoping to see his daughter, but now having to identify her body. So the investigation goes on into Itachi's apartment building, and they notice again the shopping cart. They actually find a bag of hair that was Lindsay's, and the sand soil concoction that was in the bathtub. They end up figuring out that that was actually supposed to be a way of him decomposing the body, as from the time of Lindsay's death to the time that the police had entered, Tatsuya made about 6 trips from his apartment to the local hardware store and picked up everything he needed. They found that out on CCTV footage, which to me is just like, how do you go into your apartment that many times with a shopping cart full of soil and chemicals and no one bats an eye? There are so many points in this case where it's like, how did that happen, or why did that happen? Like, from the taxi driver leaving to, you know, everyone not really saying anything about the soil and the chemicals. It's just, you know. So they noticed that that was kind of the point of this soil sand concoction, was just to decompose Lindsay's body. So now the question is and becomes, where is Tatsuya? Where is Isashi? And the next 2 years, that would become a mystery, and would only be answered by a book Isashi wrote 2 years after the fact. As he ran away, he was completely missing. And so the police put out so many posters, so much stuff is saying, you know, we were looking for this man, because again, Tokyo is a very safe place. Crime is a very low thing in Tokyo. So this is very big news, not just because it's a murder in Tokyo, but because it's a murder not of one of their citizens, but a British citizen. So now with Isashi's warrant out, everyone knows what he looks like. So with no money, no person to contact, nothing, Isashi decides, okay, if everyone knows what my face looks like, we gotta make that image go away. So he decides to perform self-plastic surgery, removing 2 of his moles off of his face, leaving him with 2 very noticeable scars. And for the next 2 years, Isashi would work in a construction facility where he would go by the name of a dead man, which is so odd that no one raised an eyebrow to the fact that, like, and again, Tatsuya was completely integrated within this company. Like, he was invited to retreats. He was an active employee. It wasn't like he would go to work, leave, come back for the next day. You know, he was a actual employee. He would be invited to events and all of this stuff, and no one batted an eye. So after, I think it was like a year and a half of hard work, Tatsuya ended up amassing 1 million yen, and decided with that to go and have 2 plastic surgeries done. One for his nose that he got shrunken, and then he had lifted upwards, and then one for his lips. So he looked almost completely different. But around that time, the police, they didn't really know what to do. At the same time, Lindsay's father was trying to get the police to do something better. You know, there was no ill will towards Lindsay's family and the police, but they were getting very sort of irritated to the fact that, like, it's been 2 years and they have come up with nothing. So they end up upping the bounty from 1 million yen to 10 million yen, which gets a lot of people more interested in trying to find Isashi. As, again, 1 million yen, a lot of money. 10 million yen, a lot of money. So they end up getting a call, and they end up saying, and the person on the other end is like, hey, I work at this plastic surgery clinic, and we found someone that looks strangely similar to the person you're looking for. And they send 2 photos, one of Isashi before the surgery and one after. And the police say, yeah, that's our guy. That's who we're looking for. So they post posters everywhere about the fact that he has now plastic surgery. He looks different. And right then and there, a couple days later, one of Isashi's co-workers, or someone who worked at the facility, the same facility as Isashi, basically told them, hey, he's here. I work with him. Like, the person you're looking for is here. So the police rush down and they arrest Isashi. So for the next 23 days, Isashi would be detained with the charge of abandoning a body. Now, during this time, his lawyer tried to BS these charges, but one day, Isashi finally said, I did kill Lindsay Hawker. And this is significant not only because of the fact that, you know, after 2 years, Lindsay's family could finally find some sort of ease, but the way he said it, that yes, he did kill her, but it was not, he did not mean to kill her. This was just what happened because he ended up having his way with Lindsay, and that he ended up accidentally strangling her because he was actually trying to get her to be quiet, which is just so disgusting. Like, you're already admitting not only to killing her, but you're also admitting that you ended up having your way with her, and that was just a byproduct of it. Like, it doesn't make that look any better. But after the fact, he was charged with a life sentence, which Lindsay's family actually wanted up to the death penalty. But if you know from other Japanese cases, the death penalty is one of the most hardest things and are very extremely rare in Japan because of their ideology. But, and I don't know, maybe I'm just really American, but like, you're already giving Isashi a life sentence. Like, why not just give him the death penalty? Like, the lengths that he went to not get caught. And the reasoning that they didn't give him the death penalty was because of his age and the fact that they thought he could be rehabilitated. Which is just like, you're giving him a life sentence. There's no rehabilitation. Like, come on. And after the trial was over, Lindsay's family did actually come out to the Japanese public and say that they were very thankful of their system, of everything else, and that Tokyo was a much safer place because of the fact that Isashi was put behind bars. But this would not be the last time that they would hear from Isashi, as Sometime later, Isashi would come out with a book that was titled Until I Was Arrested, which was about his story from after he ran away from the police to up until his inevitable capture. And the most disrespectful thing Isashi did was he offered the Walker family all royalties that the book will make, which obviously they declined. And that just, I don't know, for me it's just like every part of this case, like I don't understand the final verdict. Like, he could be changed. Like, I don't understand that, because like, how do you tell the family of the person you murdered, I want you to profit off of your own daughter's murder? Like, that is one of the most evilest things that I've heard in so long. Like, and again, I don't know who. So the thing is that this book was eventually published and eventually was turned into a film. I don't know who actually is profiting off of this book, but someone is, and it's not the Hawker family. But and eventually this was actually the top seller in both Japan and Britain. So I don't know. This is one of those cases where you just kind of wonder what prompted everything that happened. Like, there was so much that could have been done, from the taxi driver going in and, you know, figuring out what happened to Lindsay, to someone stopping Isashi from, you know, like basically questioning Isashi on why he has so much soil in an apartment building, which I know that couldn't really have done much for Lindsay at that point, but it was like, there was so much that have been done before, which, I don't know, you know, like, I don't know, this is one of those cases where you just have to sort of wonder, like, what in your brain tells you that this is, you know, what you should do. You know, not only, you know, for the murder of Lindsay Hawker, but also just the 2-year manhunt. Like, he actively ran. He actively changed his face. And he actively wrote and published that book. And that is just such a scary thought. That someone could be so delusional, because in the book, it actively doesn't focus on the Lindsay case. It doesn't talk about what led up to that point. It basically just tries to tell his side of the story, which is just, I guess I'm innocent or something. But it's just one of those things that you never have the words to describe. You know, at the end of the day, Lindsay's family at least got some sort of rest with that, you know, and hopefully Lindsay's spirit can, you know, can at least be able to rest in peace knowing that Isashi is in jail, and that, you know, from what it looked like, the family was at least somewhat able to not really move on necessarily, but be able to accept it just a bit more, knowing that Isashi is in jail for life. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.